So guys, the next topic I want to talk about and get into is PC gaming hardware in 2022. Now we're going to see a lot of change coming up. AMD, Intel, Nvidia, they've got some big products that are going to come out in the second half of the year. Okay?
Yeah.
Um, and potentially, we're going to see another generational leap in the PC space, in the PC gaming space. Okay? So, as of now, and again, let's start with AMD. Let's start with AMD. And now AMD are claiming we have the fastest gaming CPU, as they always do. Yeah, right. Yeah, and what they've done, they've released this thing called the 5800X 3D. And what this thing is the first consumer CPU with 3D V-cache technology. Yeah, 3D V-cache technology. Their Epic chip is the first V-cache chip for the data center.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's how they've played it. Now, I think Jay, you on one of the topics you had asked, what's the next big thing? And like we talked more about maybe a 5 to 10 year horizon.
Yes.
Yeah, but the next big thing really in the immediate future is for these designers and manufacturers to basically do a bit more with the packaging technology. And when I mean packaging technology, I mean 3D cache technology, so stacking, if you like.
Yep.
They're stacking the components of the chips, yeah, simply put. And what MCM, where they're having kind of like multiple chips linked together, yeah, or tiles, if you like, or chiplets. Yeah,
You've seen that with the M1 and Max and the latest
the
version of
Ultra,
the Ultra, where
yeah,
they've actually put the chips together, haven't they, with no lag, fully
yeah.
integrated.
It's absolutely that. And you've seen evidence of that in the PC space with stuff like Infinity Cache. You know. Now, getting back to what AMD have done with this X3D chip, we're actually seeing 15% more gaming performance. Yeah, but the primary benefits are, I'd say, 1080p res, which is the majority of gamers in the PC space. Okay, they're running at lower clock speeds than the vanilla, uh, 5800X. Okay, which means worse performance for non-gaming workloads. Yeah, for the X3D. Now it's really just geared towards gaming and gaming workloads. Yeah. What I also hear is that overclocking is quite limited on the X3D chip. Could be because of kind of the way the kind of cache is stacked. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's quite a pattern I think nowadays anyway, Joe, with the way we're seeing the chips. I mean the chips already come, pre kind of tuned already, so there's very little
Yeah.
gains to it, and yeah, I can understand why.
Yeah. There's no headroom for overclocking anymore, is there?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get your chip at, kind of as is. This is the performance out of the box. But I guess the question I have about this new chip, yeah, fastest gaming CPU or not, is it worth it? Seriously, is it worth it?
15% boost. It's like
Well, it's always cost performance ratio. That's always key for me.
Yeah, it is a cost performance ratio. Now, the 15% increase, I just let's be clear on that. It does vary from game to game. There's no doubt about that. And the levels of gaming performance it's being compared to is the top end Alder Lake CPU, which I think was approximately £700 or to £749 MSRP at the time. So obviously, compared to what this particular chip costs, quite a gap. Yeah. But the things to keep in mind, is it worth your 15%? Again, yeah, is it worth that? The other thing to consider is really if you're there to build a completely new system, which means new CPU, new motherboard, yeah, then I guess there's less of an advantage of going down this route. If, however, you're not going to upgrade your motherboard, you just want to like an in-place upgrade, where you can just drop in the chip and get that performance boost, and you only care about gaming performance, then it's a little bit more desirable. Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more desirable.
Joe, does that mean it's the same socket as we've got today?
Correct.
Right.
AM4.
Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And being a bit cynical, right? I think I heard conversations that the reason we've got the 5800X 3D is because, and again, this thing clocks lower. Clock speed's lower. Yeah. Usually when it happened, it's because the quality of the silicon wasn't as good, and therefore the version of the chip maybe didn't pass kind of like the quality assurance or the quality control. So being cynical, are we getting these chips because we got a batch of chips, 5800Xs that didn't pass quality control, where AMD have just decided, just slap on a bit of cash on it and then sell it for more money, Now the other side of things is obviously heat generation, and which is like it can clock higher, but they won't do it because of the heat generation aspect of it. And I think great for AMD, they've got something that's good for marketing. Whether I'm certainly a bit lukewarm on it. Lukewarm because it's got a very specific use case. Yeah, very specific. Okay, and it's not cheap. Not at all. I think it could have done with being about, I don't know, £30 cheaper than it is. £30 to £50 cheaper than it is. Yeah, that would have really put the kind of like cat amongst the pigeons.
Yeah.
But the level of cache it has is, it's undeniable. You're talking about 3 times the amount of cache, of the, basically compared to the original chip. Yeah. But I think the interesting part of this is, everybody's been talking about also pro consoles. PlayStation 5 Pro, Xbox Series X2 or, whatever they want to call it, right? But this is a route into that. So you could effectively run the same CPU, yeah? Considering that the consoles, their CPUs don't typically clock that high anyway. And the upgrade is put a bit of cash on it. And as far as they're concerned, those consoles, the only use case they deal with is games.
Yeah.
So you got a bit of, you got a route in to upgrade your CPU without changing the architecture and without kind of like having to worry about core count, clock speed. Yeah.
Yeah, but it does mean another form factor to test against, though. So I don't know if they'll do that, especially for something that still feels first version experimental to an extent.
I don't think it's that experimental, Al, because they've got Epic in the data centers already.
So is there anything relating to the kind of Unreal Engine 5 stuff that these chips will take advantage of?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think that specifically for this, I don't think so. But I understand that Unreal Engine is quite CPU heavy anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So, depending on what Unreal Engine's doing, and I don't know, having this level of cache might be useful.
So it's amazing how much more efficiency you can get out from the layers of code versus just having raw power in the CPU. Yeah, absolutely. Having a large amount of cache, that's as kind of like plug and play as you can get, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
You're not accounting for clock speed, so you don't necessarily have to worry about kind of like timings. You're not accounting for, let's say, core count. So you're not worrying having to distribute workload over a great number of cores. Any of that sort of thing. It's a pure latency play, because really what you're saying here, right? Instead of getting what I need from memory, I'm going to kind of like on-die cache, which is lower latency. What you're getting at this is basically frames.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really what you're getting in the.
But I assume that this is the bottleneck and not the GPU, right?
Correct. this is why it kind of seems, through testing, it seems to function quite well with 1080p. Yeah, I mean, the reality is if you're running something at 4K, the GPU is always going to be your bottleneck, not the CPU. But then again, in certain circumstances, you'll need some kind of like CPU power. It's just, I guess, having a game running in a little bit more stable, with fewer blips and hiccups and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is what you're getting.
When's this chip due?
It's out.
Oh, is it? All right.
It's out right now. Yeah.
Okay. So the 15% isn't an AMD 15%. It's an actual. It's the one's already tested it.
Yeah, the 15% is an AMD marketing 15%.
Oh right. Okay.
But the testing's been quite. The testing has held. Has held it up somewhat, and validated that somewhat. Obviously, not for every game, and sometimes it's more than the 15% actually. But it's pretty much accurate, and I think AMD are usually quite accurate with their marketing numbers, though they're equally quite selective.
Right.
Yeah. Though I'm a bit lukewarm about the chip itself. I just think you could have done with a little bit more. Would have been nice to see like higher end SKUs from the current generation of Ryzen chips having that cache as well. But then you've got conversations around about cost. Then you've got conversations about, well, the new Zen chips are coming out late this year. Is it worth it for us? Yeah. Then other considerations are ultimately I feel that this V-cache technology is quite expensive. So it may not scale in terms of cost the way we anticipate it might be for higher core count chips. There's all sorts of reason, I guess, not to do it. But I mean, I think the biggest one is that, look, our new generation of chips is coming out at the end of the year. Why do it? We'll give people a stopgap measure for the mobiles on the market right now and the socket on the market right now, and we'll try and retain the gaming crown at close to, let's say, 60 to 70% the cost of our competition, and try and cast some shade over them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this will work. That would work if you're just gonna stick to your current day AMD motherboard.
Yeah.
If you're looking to build a new system, then personally I wouldn't even look at this.
Yeah.
But nice try, AMD. So AMD, we have the fastest gaming CPU. What we should talk about next is really Intel. Yeah. So Intel, we also have the fastest gaming CPU. Right? And I think around about the same time, what Intel did was they released the i9 12900KS. Yeah, and it's the first consumer CPU running with a 5.5 gigahertz clock speed. Yeah, 5.5 gigahertz. And I think that's two cores out of the 8 big cores. Yeah, so that's quite significant. Yeah, that is quite significant. Now, the downside of that is that it's actually just a 5% boost versus the vanilla 12900K. 5%.
Could you possibly get worse performance for games because they're not actually geared for these new chips? If you're talking 5%, I mean, there's not.
Yeah, I think in this case, because the architecture's pretty much identical between the old and new version, you won't see a tremendous amount of difference. Let's say game upon game. I think the cache is a little bit different because it's how it is with how cache usually works. It's kind of like you need a cache hit. So as much as what you're trying to get needs to be in cache, if the cache is basically like emptied of that data you need, then they ain't gonna it's gonna be less efficient. So that's a little bit more, I think, variable.
Yeah.
But I think this would be quite consistent. But it's consistent by giving you a 5% performance boost over the original chip, which is not significant. Yeah. So obviously the question mark is it worth it? Well, it's almost 150 to £200 more expensive than the vanilla chip for a 5% increase. And the vanilla chip is £514 to £570. I've seen it for. The new chip is £749 for your 5%. So basically, that's the bleeding edge at the moment if you want, or that's a cutting edge at the moment if you want that. Yeah. And for completeness, I left the kind of rising, in my comparison, I kind of also looked at the kind of rising chips, and again, the 5800X3D is, I think, approximately £418 on the AMD site, if you can get it at that price. Yeah. The vanilla, 5800X, $299, and the 12 core 5900X, almost £360. Yeah, that I've seen it for. So these are the price comparables, really. So is it worth it? Absolutely not. not unless you've got more money than so much money that you can basically burn it. Yeah, not for a 5% increase that you're not really going to notice. If I'm being totally honest, I think it translates to probably between 1 and 3 frames of
it'll be tiny depending on what game.
Yeah, but you can say
every frame counts.
You know what? Yeah, you can say I've got the fastest gaming CPU out there. But again, it's all comparable. It's all very kind of much about muchness or whatnot. It's very much like that. But there you have it. We all have the fastest gaming CPU. Every one of us.
Yep. In the right circumstances, of course.
In the right circumstances. But I think what we should take note of is also the power. The power consumption of some of these chips. Typically, Intel are really running with a lot more power. I think some of the base TDP isn't really what it's going to be running at under stress. It's going to be significantly more. It's something to kind of look out for. Now, so that's what AMD and Intel have done right now. For Nvidia, well, we talked about the 3090 Ti, or Ti, depending on how you want to kind of call it. I kind of put a lot of shade on this, but you know what? It's actually real. Yeah, this thing's actually real. It's come out. It's on the market. People are able to get it. It's an absolute Halo product, because I've seen it retail for between £1,870 to £2,500 for a GPU, with the vanilla 3090 coming in at £1,400 to £2,100. Yeah, from what I've seen. What does the Ti or Ti have over the standard 3090? A whopping 10%. That's what. And again, I'll repeat, it's actually real. This isn't some marketing bullshit.
It was the same thing with even the 3090 itself. We all looked at it and we're like, what? You
what? Yeah.
so with an even bigger, 3090 Ti, it's like, well, okay, there's not many people that will want it. So, but seems crazy.
Absolutely.
But,
what is the point of them making these? It's just.
That's a good point, actually. I think the only point can be is just marketing kind of points, and the fact that there are some people out there who are kind of very wealthy gamers, if you like, who just want the best of the best. That's reality.
Enough money, they'll just splurge on it. But it's not really performance value minded in any way, right?
No, it's not. It's not having, let's say, it's not about delivering a product that everybody can buy, nor is it about the price performance ratio, or is it kind of delivering anything that's even sensible.
I mean, I meant it from a more of the manufacturer perspective, because part parts are already constrained, production lines are already hampered. So
they're selling these at a premium as well. They know they're not. They know again. The way that Joe's kind of covered off the performance. You're paying an extreme premium just for this, and they know they're going to sell a lot less than their mainstream kind of lower versions. So I'm sure they've done this deliberately, as Joe put it, a Halo kind of product. Hey, you have got the fastest GPU, you have got the fastest chip, kind of product.
Yeah, and not only you have, we have. Don't forget that part. Yeah. But to give like Nvidia an additional kind of like like feather in their cap, they've also got the most power hungry GPU because this thing comes in at a 450 watt TDP. So much for going green, hey. But fair enough, Nvidia. You don't have the fastest gaming CPU, but you do have the fastest GPU. Again. Alright, let's move on. So, what can we expect from AMD in the second half of the year? So this is where it gets interesting. So second half, and more likely late Q3, Q4, we're going to get Zen 4, Ryzen 7000. They've skipped a whole 1000 on desktop. Basically, that was kind of reserved for laptop. Yeah. But what they're doing now is they're moving on to a 5nm process node, which more or less means more speed, less power, and in this case 1.8 times the transistor density over 7nm, which is what they currently use. Yeah. Now, AMD have also said they're able to run a version of the chip at 5 gigahertz all cores. And I've heard this thing may go up to 5.2 gigahertz. And again, speculation, rumor. Some of this is actually concrete because AMD have already kind of announced it. It does support DDR5, PCI 5, USB 4, but I've also heard that it may be DDR5 only, which means more expense. New socket and therefore new mobiles, new motherboards, because they're basically bringing in AM5, and this will be the first chip that slots into that. Vcache, I thought was odds on, but now I'm going to put a question mark on it. One of the ways I'm thinking about it is that I wouldn't be surprised if AMD, when the time is right, offer a gaming model of their chips. If you know what I mean. This is the gaming edition with Vcache.
Well, they've already done it with the previous one, right? It'd only be obvious that they would do that same pattern.
Yeah, correct. So possible. Also, we're not really sure on whether it will have more cores. I mean, I've heard it all kind of basically plateau at 16 cores. 24 cores a possibility. I think they could do it, but it just depends on how much heat they feel from Intel's, competing chips.
Yeah.
If they don't feel that much heat, they won't do it, obviously. And again, whether this thing will have integrated graphics in the form of RDNA 2, possible. Yeah. And to be honest, right now, AMD actually are leading integrated graphics. Yeah, no doubt about that. So what can we actually expect from this? Well, they're saying 40% overall performance improvement versus Zen 3. And that translates to, I think, single and multi-threaded, and
Is that pure compute performance, or is that also heat performance, heat power consumption?
It's pure performance.
Okay.
No one really knows about the kind of
efficiency,
energy efficiency or anything like that. Yeah. But they're saying 25% improvement in single core performance. But again, nothing's really confirmed, but the fact that it's going to be running at 5 gigahertz, and that is more or less confirmed because Lisa Su was on, I think, was she on stage? And she basically actually, called that out, all cores. And that's quite impressive for AMD because, traditionally, they've always lagged behind Intel in terms of kind of clock speed. And that's one of the kind of factors in terms of, performance. So, obviously, a lot happening in AMD camp. Intel, what they're doing second half of the year, Raptor Lake. So again, the next version of their CPU range, a step up from Alder Lake, still using these big little cores. They're talking about new hybrid CPU core changes for improved performance. What that means, no idea. But, they're talking about new Raptor Cold P cores, so obviously enhanced kind of power cores, I want to call them, but the same E cores, so the same Gracemont cores, the little cores, yeah. Improved cache for gaming. What is that? Not sure. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be like a big cache, effectively, more cache. That's how it sounds to me. But obviously, they're supporting DDR5, PCIe 5, Thunderbolt 4. And I think the Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4 standard is coming together. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're using the same kind of socket, so the LGA 1700. So that means obviously you could probably drop it into the same kind of motherboards, and also using the same Intel 7 node process, which was being bandied around as Intel's 10nm process. Yeah. So I don't know if you would call this Intel 7 Plus or something like that, to give it some respect. Okay. And people are speculating that this might come in terms of clock speed with 200 to 300 megahertz more clock speed. So you might be looking at a top kind of clock speed of 5.7 to 5.8 gigahertz. That's what we're looking at. And more cores, potentially 24. But again, nothing confirmed. All rumors. All rumors.
And I'm assuming no changes in the nanometer transistor kind of sizes and shape.
For Raptor Lake, potentially. I mean, speculation that they're on Intel 7 Plus. And that's a make-believe name, but but it's not quite. I don't think that's like going from let's say a 7nm process to a 5nm process. Yeah. But there's going to be some improvements there, but it's not quite that. Now, moving on to graphics. So AMD RDNA 3 again, second half of this year, second half of 2022. This is where we talked about a little bit about the packaging. So they're using this multi-chip module design. They're moving away from CUs, compute units, to work group processors, and that's a change in their kind of their architecture and the way they're organizing, the compute units and the componentry of the actual GPUs. The top end SKU, Navi 31, is claimed to have 3 times the number of stream processors versus the current high end. Their current version of the 3090, the 6900 XT. Clock speeds going from 2.5 gigahertz to 3 gigahertz. And this is an interesting series of numbers. I mean, there have been certain leaks, or so-called leaks and rumors that have said Navi 31, the top end SKU, weighs in with 76.8 T-flops. And again, T-flops aren't the be and end all of GPU performance. Yeah. Then Navi 32, 57.3 T-flops. That's your mid-range card.
Crazy numbers.
Navi, I know. Navi 33, 24.6 T-flops. And the RX 6900 XT, their current top end, 23 T-flops.
We're getting. I mean, those sort of numbers, you get such, and when the games are actually built for them, you get such high fidelity that what are you going to do with the extra teraflops? You're going to have to go to 8K.
And would it be even worth it? Would it be even worth it?
It's not. It's no. I mean, the power that you need will go up exponentially, won't it? The more.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how they leverage it, and again, you don't know how much kind of ray tracing and the like play into this.
Yeah, that'll eat a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, or whether they can offload some AI onto these cards and how that factors in. And I remember for a time, I think starting from the PS4 generation, they were using this thing called asynchronous compute, which meant that if your graphics card or GPU wasn't leveraging that compute, right, the PS4 and some specific AMD graphics cards were able to leverage the kind of like haircut, if you like, the spare compute for other things like AI and stuff like that. So there's like, potential for that, I think. Don't know, but it's impressive numbers. And again, this is all kind of rumor and so-called leaks and stuff like that. But I've seen this multiple times. Like, so you kind of have to wonder, is this real? The clock speeds, again, that's not far-fetched. The AMD kind of GPUs really run at high clocks. I mean, I think even the PS4 is 2.2 gigahertz. And current day, there are some custom AMD GPUs running at 2.6 gigahertz. All real. Power, however, at the top end, we're talking 375 to 450 watts. Yeah, it's getting expensive in more than one way actually. Now, moving on to Nvidia, they've got this thing called Lovelace, code name for it, the RTX 4000 series. So again, late 2022. I think we're talking about TSMC's 4nm process, and that's maybe there's some rumors. Now the top end SKU is going to have 144 streaming multi-processors. Yeah, these the RTX 3090, which has 82. So it's not quite double, but it's kind of going in that direction, and that's reflected in the amount of CUDA cores, 18,000 versus approximately 10,000. They're clocking up to 1.6 gigahertz, up to I think 2 gigahertz is the rumor, but the power, the rumors are 600 watts. 600 watts. If you basically say that out aloud, that's a number. That is a number.
But that'll be the top end. What for the 4090 or something?
I don't know. 600 watts for a graphics card. I mean, come on.
You'll need that for the metaverse and all the NFTs as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. But they're talking about a GDDR6 Plus or GDDR7. So obviously, better, faster memory, or I should say faster memory. And there's been rumors that Nvidia has its own Infinity cache, which may mean it sticks with GDDR6 for the time being. That's also possible. And last but not least, Intel. So finally, Intel. I've got obviously a credible range of GPUs in Intel Arc GPUs. I think codename Alchemist. So the ZHPG product. So what are we looking at? So desktop, I think, was touted for Q2 2022. So we've not seen them for desktop yet. I think they've rolled out for laptop. So I can only assume that's been delayed, coming out later. I've not seen that many reviews for the laptop products either, so I'm not really sure what's happened to them. And it's the first dedicated Intel GPU since 1998. 1998. I mean, obviously they're big in integrated graphics because their chips sell so well, but that's really it. They're talking TSMC 6nm process node, and the top end SKU is comparable to an RTX 3070 and RTX 6800. So good for your first attempt, but by the time it comes out, and by the time I think the Q3 hits us, they're already going to be lagging behind. They've actually just got to get something out in the market now.
Yeah. What's driving this? Again, like jokes aside, the metaverse must be a big part of this, right?
Potentially, also that really Intel want to compete in this market.
Yeah. I mean, go on, Joe.
Yeah. There's also the kind of data center, like play as well. GPUs for the data center are a big thing. You're right. I mean, you're right. If the metaverse, is the next big thing, there's a possibility they need to have a product there.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need GPU power in order to, assuming it's a VR metaverse. You definitely need that sort of stuff. But I think it just stems from the fact that they had a change of leadership. They had a massive shake-up, right? They finally caught up again because on the CPU front, after AMD took them right to the wall on that stuff, and Intel, I think, have managed to catch back now. And they've still got a very good brand name, and I think this is just them opening up, using their expertise and kind of pushing further into another market which has synergies, and it kind of makes sense. So
Yeah, I think it does make sense. I would say, look, I think Raja Koduri, who runs the GPU division for Intel, he actually was there before the CEO change. But I would say, look, if you look at the GPU market, I think it's multi-million, multi-billion. So clearly, there's money to be made. It's likely to grow if all of these other kind of things we're talking about, like the metaverse and whatever else become real.
And probably they probably looked at the Bitcoin miner market and are thinking, maybe it could be quite nice to take a little bit of slice of that. So
yeah, who knows, right? I mean, when there's money to be made, it's a business decision, isn't it? At the end of the day. But I think for us, I mean, look, it is really good to have competition.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality of it. It's yeah, I mean this particular generation of Intel products isn't really, unless they surprise everybody, isn't really going to be, in terms of pure specs and performance, comparable to the up and coming generation from AMD and Nvidia. But it's a beginning, and you can only see Intel accelerating.
Yeah, and if they offer it a good value point, it's another one of those that if it can compete on one angle on it, then it will still sell. There was I mean, I guess now though, with supply, because GPU prices are starting to tip back to getting closer back to retail again, because the supply is kind of starting to improve. But if they get it right, there still should be a decent amount of demand for GPUs.
Yeah, absolutely. Let battle commence, as it were, and it'll also be interesting to see, how it plays out in terms of the kind of laptop market as well, where AMD and Intel are going to have both a CPU and a GPU offering. What does this mean for APUs? Yeah, as well, because that's going to be a real market at some point.
Yeah, and I think you're right. APUs in particular, especially for as long as it's metaverse capable, I think that'll be the key, right? So if it can support VR to an extent, I think that'll be perfect for it, right? That's probably its main market if it can get that to work.
I mean, let's be honest. Like we've had APUs for a while. They're all sitting in the consoles. Yeah, but the APUs for PCs are the GPU portion of it is usually quite low powered.
Yeah, and the laptops they've been there for, and that's why I guess Intel have been doing that for years. It's just all pre-packaged as part of what they've got.
Yeah, but getting out a good APU, it's going to probably annihilate the budget GPU market. I'm sure there's going to be some sort of cost savings in terms of the laptop technology as well. It's a single chip. You only have to worry about cooling that single chip as well. And again, I don't know what it means from the memory configuration, but you can imagine it's there's something there as also. I think they're kind of thinking along those lines, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I mean that's what I'm seeing here. So, guys, the long and short of it is that this year is going to be a really exciting year for PC gaming technology. We're refreshing all of the CPUs. That's happening. The GPU technology is also being refreshed. And the refreshes are not just a refresh, it's a real step up here. It's a generational leap we're seeing here, which is quite interesting. We have Intel entering the market, in terms of discrete GPUs, and that can only be good for everybody, to be quite honest. What Nvidia do now in terms of, let's say, they, obviously they're big players in the GPU market. They're, let's be honest, they're number one for a good reason. But what they do now with a lack of a CPU is going to be quite interesting. And I think their play is the enterprise, really, more than consumer. ARM's not happening now, but it doesn't mean they can't get they don't have an ARM license. I think they do have an ARM, license. So it's just interesting to see kind of how those plans play out, because you have to think they have big plans for ARM, and the reasons why they wanted to purchase ARM were for those reasons. So, at some point, we're going to see a bit more from those guys. I mean, whether ARM's, to be clear, ARM is a big factor in the consumer market, because that architecture is in most of the mobile kind of devices out there. And ARM could be something big in maybe kind of the Linux space, something along those lines. But compared to Windows, that's a tiny tiny space. But Windows has a RISC-based kind of version. So how far is that going to be pushed? And if that gets pushed, right, then Nvidia might have an angle to play, in the consumer space anyway. But I still say it's more about enterprise. Yeah. So interesting times. Yeah, very interesting times. How it translates into better games, I don't know yet. You know what I mean? Right. But in terms of pure technology, it looks pretty kind of like we're in for a bit of a stellar year, I think. And I think, guys, with that said, it's time to move on to the next topic.